Hello there, good evening everyone. I am Abigail Jones. I am a family solicitor working in Stowe Family Law. Stowe Family Law is a specialist family law firm and the UK's the leading, the largest family law team in the UK. They have a range of family lawyers offering assistance across all aspects of family law. And we are here today with Rebecca Spittles, who is a divorce coach, and also on the line is Hannah Curtis. She is another solicitor who also works in Stowe Family Law. We're going to talk today about building a new life after divorce. And Rebecca, that's probably where I already hand over to you, I think.
May help if I unmute myself first though. Hello. So firstly, Happy New Year to everybody. It's a difficult time. We really accept that. It's January. It's the 18th. We are 100 years away from December, but we're also 100 years away from February. So it does feel particularly dark and cold at the moment. So, you know, if you're feeling that, we're feeling it too. You've just got to look after yourself and be gentle. So the way we thought we'd look at this today is to talk about divorce for the ones of us that have come into 2024. And I know there's already, you know, I know myself from my practice that there's already those people whose marriages have been ended this month, quite literally this month. So what we wanted to do today was talk about the emotions that's going on for everybody right now, but also a real brief summary of the legal process, which both Abigail and Hannah will cover today. I want to talk about the shock and the upset that comes from knowing that the marriage has ended, and how you can look after yourself the best you can. We all appreciate that it is not easy, and there is absolutely no magic wand, sadly. I wish there was, but it's just not there. So what we need to do is put ourselves at the centre, along with any children that we've got or vulnerable adults that need our support, but we need to be very conscious of what we are doing with ourselves. And that starts off in a very basic way. That starts with getting outside. Simple, very boring, very straightforward, but just get outside. If your marriage has been brought to an end last week before, or even, you know, today even, there is a future, there is hope, but it's not going to feel like it right now. I'm not going to dress it up. What we need to do is be really honest with ourselves and just be gentle and take our time to focus on what we need. And that includes facing things, getting some knowledge together, you know, no matter where you are in it, with regards to what's just happened in a separation being thrown on you, or whether it's something you've instigated. Knowledge is power. So start building a network of people around you, being open, saying to friends, you know, family that you can rely on, even work colleagues potentially for some of us, and say, look, my marriage has ended. Whether it's your choice or whether it was imposed on you, my marriage has ended and I'm really wobbly. And it's dark and it's cold and it's January. And I don't know whether I'm facing backwards or forwards. Put those people in place for you straight away, because then they're always going to be there to keep your head above water. They're going to be there to make you laugh, give you a hug if that's what you want, you know, take you out for a coffee if that's what you need, or even, you know, the odd glass of wine. But it is important to be open about it. Don't close down. It's easy to want to go into hibernation, especially when you get bad news. Very easy to just pull a duvet over your head and want it all to go away, but we can't, especially if we've got children. That takes on a whole new meaning, and we need to find some way of functioning. So low expectations of yourself. It's not about achieving great things. It is simply about putting one foot in front of the other and parenting. You know, and by parenting, I mean feeding them, getting them to school, you know, trying to show them that life goes on, but at the same time, knowing and accepting that your heart is breaking into 1,000 pieces. And then taking the time to work out your next steps. And those next steps they don't have to be a legal process necessarily, but it's just understanding what you do next. And obviously it is very daunting. You hear the divorce word and suddenly you feel like your world has gone from being like this and you know what your future looks like to suddenly it's micro, it's mini, and everything's closing in on you and you don't know what you thought you knew for the next 12 months, 18 months is no longer there. It's gone. And that's daunting and that's terrifying. So knowledge, as I said before, knowledge is power. Get that bit of paper or get your notes on your phone and start writing down immediately all the things that you're immediately worried about, you know, whether that's money, where I'm going to live, even down to things like, oh God, we've got a holiday booked in March. What's going to happen to that holiday? You know, the kids we're all excited about it. Is that still going to be able to go ahead? Being really clear with yourself about all of the things that are coming up and any kind of obstacles that you feel. And there's nothing too big and there's nothing too small. You know, I've had in, you know, past years, people say, oh, I'm really worried about, I feel really stupid, but I'm really worried about the cat. You know, as the cat's always been my cat. What happens when this is all over? All of those things are, you know, they're genuine concerns for you. So get them written down, because the only way we can work through them is know they're there. And so when it comes to the actual legal process, it's really important at this point that you get that information and you are clear about what it's going to look like, so that you can potentially start this time next year in a completely different headspace. I think that brings me beautifully into Abigail and Hannah.
I'm sorry, Hannah, I don't think I can hear you, lovely.
We can't hear you.
We've always got some sort of technical problems. Sorry, everybody. We'll just leave Hannah to sort of work that bit out, and I'm sure she'll join us again shortly. So thank you, Rebecca. It does lead us into the divorce process. The divorce process, thankfully, is far simpler than it used to be some years ago. I know I'm saying that from a lawyer perspective, and I know it's probably easy for me to say that from a lawyer perspective. This is something I do on the regular, and it's not something that everybody faces every day. But take it from me, it is in a somewhat easier way to get divorced than we used to. Back a few years ago, we had to give lots of reasons or something as to why we've got divorced. We had to lay a blame. We had to play blame game as how it was used to be referred to. We don't have to do that anymore. And we have a no fault divorce system. We don't have to sit there and say it's his fault, it's her fault, she did, he did, they did. We don't have to do that anymore. You can simply complete a divorce application on the online website, on the Gov website. You just fill out your standard information, your names, the addresses, date of births, who you are, where you're from, where you live, and where, importantly, you got married. Upload a copy of the marriage certificate, and that essentially is now what your divorce application looks like. So gone are the days where we had to write War and Peace about who did what. Simply, this is me, this is you, the relationship's over. You can either do that as a single application, a solo application, or you can do that as a joint application. They are very much the same in the sense that your outcome is exactly the same. You still go through the rest of the process, this is the same. So it doesn't matter, there's no benefit necessarily, or negative or pro or con in terms of the legal perspective. There might be a benefit in how amicable you are or how civil you are to do it as a joint thing, because you might think, well, we've made this decision together as a couple and we'll finish it together as a couple. That might be your decision. But in terms of, does it have a benefit or a negative? Is it going to be a lasting effect? No, not at all. It doesn't matter which way you do the application. If it is done as a sole applicant, once that's filled out, all the boxes are ticked, you've paid your money, which at the moment is £593. I'm sure at some point we'll get updated information to say it's gone up a little bit. Thank you very much. Probably April we'll find that out in line with everything else that comes in. But those fees are fixed, unfortunately, by the government, and your solicitor, whoever that will be, has no control over that. Once that's paid, all sent off, The other person, who is called the respondent, will get a notification to say there is an application, see a copy, please can you respond? And that response is a very simple tick box exercise now. That will get sent off once the response is done, whizzes off into the ether, all done online, and it gets processed. It takes a little while for it to be processed into a conditional order. The decree nisi stage is the old terminology. It takes about 20 weeks to get there, but the phrase, it's simply the phraseology is different. It's still a decree nisi. It is now just a conditional order. 6 weeks after your conditional order, you can ask them to make it a final order, and it is the final order that is the point where your marriage is legally over. So there is your whistle stop tour of divorce itself. How is that, Rebecca?
That's fab. And I think it's also worth noting that if the 593 makes you, terrifies you, if you are in receipt of certain benefits, you are entitled to support with the payment. But that would be something you'd have to investigate yourself before logging in. And obviously it's not my speciality, but I would say that is out there. Don't let that be something that puts you off, because there are, ways and means around that if you are in receipt, like I said, of certain benefits. And as Abby said, it's great from the no fault. Since that's come in, it's a huge relief for people emotionally, because you aren't putting blame on each other. And it does mean that you can, with the best will in the world, start the process as amicably as possible. Because there is going to come a time, if you've got children, we'll come to the finances, I think, at the end, but when it comes to children, where you are going to have to co-parent. And this time of year is a hotbed for our emotions and feeling aggravated and irritated. And, a lot of couples, a lot of families at this point in the year are trying to put a structure in place for the next 12 months. Some people, I accept, do that in September with the school year, but some people do it in January. And it can really bring out versions of us that we're not particularly fond of. And dealing with another person is very difficult when you've both got a very clear view of how you think it should be. So with regards to that, communication is key. Staying calm is key. Not reacting. Look at this like a timetable for your children, and so that everybody, especially your children, know what the year ahead holds. You don't have to present it as a year ahead to the kids, but as in being able to say, yeah, you're at your mum's every other weekend between now and the summer holidays, but actually Easter, you're going to be with your mum for a whole week, and you're going to go away. It's just giving that certainty, which helps absolutely all of us on every level. Reduces our stress levels, gives us chance as single parents to plan. If you know that every other weekend from now until the summer, you've always got that weekend where the children are with the other partner, you have got time to plan stuff for you. And so when it comes to looking at your life with divorce inside of it, you've got a space to do that. Whether that's building new hobbies, new interests, meeting new people, getting, dating even, which if marriage has just ended, that's going to be the furthest thing from your mind. So that, with regards to scheduling, that is where I would sit down, send the first email, or send the first schedule if you're using a family app, and try to find a way of moving that on. Abby or Hannah, have you got noise? Have you got sound now, Hannah? No, we still can't hear you. No, still can't. It's over to you then, Abby.
Well, I've sent her a little message, so hopefully if she rejoins and comes back on, we'll be able to fix it. Alas, we always love technology when it works.
Yes, exactly.
But yes, it does. It leads us on to, and I do note some of the pop-ups in the question and answer. Thank you all so much. We will come back to them once we've finished having a chat, and of course we'll answer all of your questions. In terms of scheduling and in terms of how that's going to work if you have children, again, it's all going to depend really on what your family needs. And I'm sure Rebecca will second that, is what is your family unit, how is it made up, how many of you are there, you know, what are the ages, are there any particular needs that everybody in this unit has? So what works for you doesn't work for everybody else. What timetable works for you, or what schedule works for you doesn't work for everybody else. So that's the one thing to take away, is any type of co-parent, any type of parallel parent, any type of shared arrangement is never going to be the same for two sets of couples or two separations. Everybody's different. In terms of how you manage that with your children, it's, well, frankly, if you can agree, brilliant. If you can agree, if you can talk, if you can say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to work it, you have this time, I have this time, it's a back and a forth and discussion, fantastic. That is ultimately always going to be the best thing possible. And there's always a emphasis on, if parents can agree to do something, that is always best case scenario. If you can't agree, you have a couple of options. And I'm not just talking about if you can't agree for a weekend, if you can't agree for this day, which I'm talking about the whole. How is every weekend looking? How is the holidays looking? How is it looking on a basis where you have it all set out? Because if it's all set out, you don't have to go back at another point and have another conversation to say, oh, I know we discussed weekends, but we didn't discuss the Easter holidays. But we didn't discuss Christmas. We didn't discuss the summer, which is why I'm emphasizing, let's get it all looked at. And it might seem a lot, and it might seem overwhelming to think, what's this whole schedule going to look like? But if it's done once, then it's all done, and all you simply have to do is follow through. So if you two can't talk, you might want to consider mediation, if that's at all possible. Mediator can help you come to an agreement. They can help facilitate agreements. Mediators shouldn't and wouldn't give you independent advice. They wouldn't talk to you about one thing and say another thing to them. It's simply, can we come to an agreement? Can they help you come to an agreement? If for whatever reason that's not possible, if you are dealing with a bit more of a complicated situation where being amicable isn't possible, if you're dealing with a situation where the ex has been potentially a bit abusive, has potentially been quite toxic, then that might not be possible. And it's that point we may need to look into, is there a need for a child arrangements order? Is there a need for a court to step in? And it's at that point where it's not to say that the court will take over completely, it will give you a timetable. It will give you a step-by-step of, let's do this by this day to work out the next step, with the aim of coming to a final order, whether that's an agreed order or whether it's an order that a judge has looked at with all the evidence to say, this is what I think should happen overall. It is big and scary going to court. I absolutely can understand that. And again, like I said about the divorce, it might not be big and scary to somebody like me or Hannah, because this is our jobs, but it is big and scary for clients who don't ever do this and probably thought they were never ever going to do this. But I always try to say to clients, look at what you get at the end. So at the end, you should hopefully have your final version of what's going to happen, and that sets out your birthdays, your term time contacts, your holiday contacts, your Christmas contacts. So that takes the fire out, and it allows you then to just follow that through. Follow through what's ordered.
Lovely. And I think it's really important, and I'm very keen to share this. I have been through a court process with regards to child arrangements, and it's not easy. I'm not, it is not an easy process. And when you are dealing with a difficult human being on the other side, and it's potentially a high conflict, that it's not going to be made any easier by court. So, it's not a one size fits all, but as Abby said right at the beginning, it's really important with child arrangements that no one situation is the same. What works for one does not work for another. So what one of your work colleagues has got with their children might not be the same model that works for you. And it's really important to honour that, and really important to understand that about yourself. It is also very difficult when the parent on the other side, whoever they are, won't come to agreement with you or won't discuss it with you. That happen, you know, that does happen. And sometimes that's when court can be really helpful, and sometimes mediation can be really helpful. But yeah, you know, it's always a very it's a difficult time when it comes to our children. They are the most important part of, you know, the majority of people's separations, and there is no easy quick fix with that.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you, Hannah. Hi.
Amazing. I just to really sort of second that, and we have to ask ourselves, and the whole sort of the benchmark that we attest to, or that we work to when we're looking at these cases, is what is in the best interests of the children, and we have to remain focused on them. We see so many parents who become entrenched in hostilities and unpleasantries that they forget at the bottom of it that there are children involved. And as Rebecca was saying before I sort of had to leave, that it's the certainty that you can achieve by putting an agreement in place that can set you up for the next year, so that you're in a much better place. You know, you have the structure, and you know what's going to happen, and that in itself can only be in not only the best interests of your children, but yourself as well, and your entire, your whole family. That's what we focus on when we're giving advice. That's what we have to concentrate on.
Absolutely. And I've will often be clear when it comes to court orders and child arrangements orders that sometimes it's the perfect vehicle when you are in a high conflict situation, and it just settles the waters for the first couple of years. It doesn't, sometimes it's just what you need is that structure, and that structure can equally be achieved through mediation. Even in high conflict situations, you can use shuttle mediation, where you're sat with a mediator, you're in one room, the other side are in another room, and the mediator goes between the two people. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, that mediation doesn't necessarily mean you're both sat in a room on a table facing each other, that actually there is other routes in order to get through mediation. And also there's now the power of the internet, like we're using now, where mediation is run with a mediator, and then you're both on your individual places on your screen, so it's not quite as intense as it would have been like pre-COVID, where you were always in a room with each other. So don't be put off by that, and just try. It's just trying to find a solution that works for you and your family and the children within your family and the people outside of that support you.
Absolutely. Just to come to a point that's popped in the chat about family court not applying to children who are teens.
Yes.
Family court will usually apply up until, or you can usually apply for an order, I should say, up until that child is 16.
Yeah.
After that time, the court will not necessarily make any orders for that particular child. The reason for that is that child is seen as being able to give their own decisions, their own thoughts, their own feelings within who they want to see and when they want to see. It's important to note that the children's thoughts and feelings are always tried to be taken into account, depending upon their age, of course. It's a child who is 12's thoughts and feelings are going to have very different weight to it than a child who's 4 years old. And that's not to say they're ignored, but it is given weight in accordance with their age and understanding. But the closer that child does get to the age of 16, the more weight their thoughts and feelings do, in fact, have.
Fab.
We've got a couple of questions, Rebecca, in the Q&A.
Do you want to finish off with the finances, or do you want
Perfect.
to do the questions as we go? I'm happy to do whatever. Do either.
So these ones are about co-parenting and the divorce process. So it might be a good
let's do these.
It might be a good time to address these, and then we can go on to the finances. So generally, the queries or the points raised in the Q&A are about toxic partners, toxic exes, toxic abuse, post-separation abuse, parental alienation is the general vibe of these. And I agree that if we can keep it amicable, that is, wonderful. But the reality is people separate for lots of reasons. And if everybody was amicable,
there'd be no divorce.
There'd be no divorce. There'd be no family solicitors, unfortunately, for me and Hannah.
Yeah. And I think that's, we have to be really careful how we use the terms toxic with regards to family law. Of course, you know, this is one of the reasons I exist. I went through a particularly acrimonious divorce and separation with the court process involved. But I think we have to take those cases in isolation and focus on the generic, on the general consensus surrounding sorting out child arrangements. You know, it's not to say it doesn't happen, and we're not saying it doesn't happen, but I think it's a very sensitive subject. But I think, you know, when we're dealing with any kind of toxic people, ex-partners or otherwise, the only way to deal with it is calmly and quietly. You know, it's just dealing in fact and fact only. That's it. You only deal in fact. And you know, you are not you do not have to sit and take extended levels of abuse from anybody, you know, again, whether it's your ex-partner or whether it's your you know, somebody you know in the street. So I think it's very important that we're not saying it doesn't happen, but I think we have to be sensible and measured with, you know, how you would deal with that, because it's a very much one-to-one, you know, very specific case by case thing. I don't know what Hannah's view or Abigail's view is on that.
Hannah?
Yeah, I we have difficulties, and a lot of the cases that come to us are where people find themselves in a situation where it's just becoming untenable to continue discussions directly with the other parent, or because, you know, that relationship is so difficult. Sometimes that's something that we can help with, because, you know, having someone on your side, on your team, to sort of help you through that and deal with that communication can help with that, you know, making that better for you. Unfortunately, it's something that we do come, you know, that a lot of our cases have people involved who are difficult and, you know, are dealing with things in a negative way. We just offer our support, I suppose, in navigating that, so we can get better at, you know, a good outcome for you and the children, whether you know, if we're talking about in children cases and co-parenting cases, or if we're talking about going through the sort of divorce process.
And I think, just to sort of, you know, back up what Hannah's just said there, you know, it is understanding. I work a lot with high conflict separation and divorces. You know, that's partly the reason why I exist, and it is there to support the client, or, you know, support you emotionally, so that the lawyers can do their job, which is getting you through the process. And, you know, there's lots of different charities available, and I think Kate's just posted about support with regards to domestic abuse. That's really important. You know, please access those things, speak to you know, charities, GPs, etc.
Perfect. Thank you, Rebecca.
Okie doke. So I think the third and final part would be the finances and what that looks like, because I've got to be honest, I think that's probably one of the scariest. It's the question I get asked most. You know, am I going to lose my house? Am I going to lose my, you know, are we going to lose everything? We're going to be penniless. And, you know, it's highly stressful. And this is where you getting some really clear advice from a legal representative is really important, because no one can comment on your finances other than you and people that you share it with. So really having a grasp of what's what you own, what you don't own, you know, what's in the bank, what's in the pensions, you know, what you earn, all of those things all form part of this. And it is a scary time. So just, again, go easy. Knowledge is power. Get that information, start writing notes, start looking at potentially things like your outgoings, and understand where you are as a human alongside your children. And, you know, I mean, finance is not my expertise, but Hannah or Abby can come to us in a bit more detail about the process. But the process is there, and there is laws regarding how marital assets are split.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think the first thing I wanted to touch upon is absolutely what you said about find out what you have, what you don't have, what there is, because that's one of the biggest things that, firstly, myself or Hannah, if we're helping somebody work out a financial settlement, or even if they end up in the court process, and do rest assured that is a last resort, that's the first thing, or one of the biggest things we want to know is what is there, because ultimately we can't divide what we don't know. So again, knowledge is absolute power. What is there, how much it's worth, what is coming in and what is going out is always going to be one of the first questions that you will probably be asked. Whether that's by a solicitor, a mediator, in the family court system. In terms of, again, how it's dealt with, the process is going to greatly depend on how we manage it, whether that is you've spoken to each other, whether that is you've gone through mediation, whether that is you're speaking to somebody like myself or Hannah. The process will somewhat vary in which one we are. Again, if you're amicable, brilliant. The first 1 or 2 might be the best shout for you. If you're not amicable, then the chances are you'll be speaking to somebody like me or Hannah. Isn't that right, Hannah?
Yeah, I think so. It's because it's about it's the unknown, isn't it? When you get to a point where you can't reach that agreement, and people you just don't know where to go next, because you're finding that the other person's not telling you what, you know, their financial position, or you just aren't able to get to that point where you can agree anything, then yeah, that's where people come to us, and we, you know, have to take steps to go through the court process, or go again. Mediation's are also a method of alternative dispute resolution that we can go through. But yeah, when it becomes difficult, there's always a way through things. I think that's the point, isn't it? Is that if you can agree, and that's, you know, that's fantastic, and we can even help, you know, we can help with that stage if you need assistance with that, and there are lots of people and different organizations who can help you try to get to an agreement. And if you can, then fantastic, but there is always a way out. You know, there is always a way to deal with these things, and actually taking the opportunity to learn about the process and start the process is, you know, something. It's difficult now, and we understand that. If you can start that process, there is always a way through it. You will always get to the other side, and hopefully for the better. Hopefully, as Rebecca said, hopefully this, you know, if you deal with this now and you take these steps now, this time next year, you know, you'll be in a much different situation, hopefully better.
Yeah, Hannah, I think that's perfect. Is there anything else on finances that you two would like to bring up, or are we?
I would just say that the finances is again, like the children matters. It is going to depend on you both, how long you were married, how the finances came about, what is it that you both have, who worked and how much you both worked. A lot of things are going to depend upon it, and there often are more questions in the first instance than there are answers, because
Absolutely.
It is a lot of investigation. It's a lot of, how did we get to this point? How did we get this money? Who has the money, or who is the big earner, if there is one big earner? But also, not only that, one of the biggest and most important questions is to think to yourself, what do you need? Not just, what do I need today, tomorrow? What do you need when you separate, when your divorce is final, when the finances are divided? What do you need in order to move on? What are your needs? What are your housing needs for yourself? If you've got any children, what are they? Because that will give you more of a clear idea of how much you need to be looking at. That then gives you the building blocks to say, I need X amount to get this. Okay, once I've got that, I can do this. And before you know it, you're away from a divorce, you finish your finances, and you've got those building blocks to take you to the next bits and the next bits.
Fab, definitely. And I think, you know, from a coaching perspective, it's important that you find a way to look at what it is you want and you need, so that you can start to put the building blocks in place. I think we've got some questions there, Abby.
Yes, I've just decided to separate and my ex-husband is refusing to move out. What can I do? Or should I move out, but I worry about leaving the house and the kids? The atmosphere is not good.
Okay.
Do you want to try first, or shall I?
I would go with you first from the legal stance, and then from the emotional kind of side of it.
It will be difficult if this house is a jointly owned property. You cannot necessarily force anybody out unless we are covering off things like abuse and we're in non-molestation order territory. But about leaving, it doesn't necessarily detriment you to any way. The house is still a matrimonial asset. You know, it's a matrimonial asset, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 2 years down the line, it is a matrimonial asset. From my perspective, you have to make sure you're safe. Firstly, is the situation safe? Is the situation secure? Is this something that is going to remain untenable? Or is it, at the moment, because it's a fresh situation and a fresh conversation, it's difficult? If it is desperately untenable and becoming problematic and scary, we may need to have some long, hard thoughts about what do we need to do. Are you able to leave? Or is this going to have to be in the realms of occupation orders, non-molestation orders to court?
Okay. I think from where I sit, it's about the atmosphere and the kids. You know, that's really important.
Yeah.
That the children aren't. It's very difficult when you're in when you're in a situation you've just separated. You know, you're both sore, you're both hurting, you're both bruised, and there are these children in the midst of it who are trying to navigate it too. Sometimes if you are in a situation where it is amicable, which it can be, it's sitting down, having that conversation and saying, you know, look, we're both unhappy. How can we frame our lives? How can we sort our lives, timetable them even to keep the children's lives as stable as we possibly can while we work through this. Yeah. But like Abby said, if you're going to, if it is about moving out or, taking those next steps out, is thinking about that really seriously and getting a further advice. I don't think it's something you could answer in a generic sense.
No. Next question is, my ex is saying we don't need to bother with lawyers, but I'm not sure. I'm just worried about the costs and being out of my depth. Hannah, what about this one for you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think costs are always going to be, something that we have to bear in mind. It's not something that we and anyone should ever shy away from. If you're instructing a solicitor, that's just part of the part and parcel really of it. But I think there's that the value, I think, is what you need to sort of seriously think about is this a process that you feel like you have the knowledge and you can deal with yourself, and actually is there value in having a team around you who can essentially give you the advice that you need and position you in the best possible way so that you get the outcome that you achieve. The first question that I always say to people when they're asked, when they come to me, will always be, what is it that's concerning you the most? And if that's something that we can address quite simply and actually I can you can just get more information and that sort of satisfies your concerns, then fantastic. We're never going to sit you down and say that you need to instruct or do anything more than you feel like you need to, but it's just about you being comfortable with, don't let someone tell you that it's or make a decision for you. It's about making sure that you're happy, because this is your future, so you have to be happy with the steps that you're taking. So I would say reach out to anyone, organizations, us as solicitors, reach out to people and gauge what you want from them. I would say that.
Yeah, and I think that it is something that I hear a lot in my coaching space, where one or other party has said to one or other party, oh, we don't need solicitors, we can do this. I think it's more, you just have to take it by yourself and go, what do I need from this? If you think you need some legal support or some legal help, or even just a fixed fee for a certain amount of information, it's important that you do that. And if it upsets the other person, then that's just going to have to be the way it is, unfortunately. I'm very pro knowing your rights, understanding where things are, not hearsay, not what might be on the internet or not on the internet, really clear guidelines as to what is going to happen next. And if you can get that from a solicitor or another legal channel, then you absolutely should, and it should be your choice and your decision, nobody else's. Not not the ex-partner, not your mum, not your best mate. What do you want to do? And if that is just going to get some advice, simple, clear advice about your position, then that's what you should do. Absolutely. Sorry, I feel quite strongly about it.
I can tell, Rebecca.
Yeah, I've just seen on here a question about Mackenzie Friend.
Yep.
Can I answer that one?
Go for it.
Yeah. So Mackenzie friend is, for those people that don't know what it is the name of the person given to a non-legal representation in a non-legal representative in a family court setting. That a Mackenzie friend is there to take notes, sit next to you, hold your hand, go through, sit there and remind you of things that you wanted to say and you discussed beforehand. A Mackenzie friend is not somebody who can talk on your behalf, and they are not legally qualified. Well, they can be legally qualified, but generally, there are the people in the charities that are retired solicitors or retired barristers, but they're not there in a legal capacity. They are there as a handholder. I think that they are a really useful resource. I do a lot of Mackenzie friend work myself. And it can be really beneficial. There's a cost saving, obviously, versus having legal advice, but it's different horses for different courses. You need to be clear about the person you're engaging and who you're talking to, and you obviously need to get permission from the court and permission from the other side that they are happy with the Mackenzie friend that you have chosen. So there's bits and pieces to the process. But yeah, I think they're a great alternative if you are happy and confident to speak for yourself in a family court arena.
Absolutely. And to jump on the comment about taking notes as well, if you're talking for yourself, it might be a bit much for you to talk for yourself, listen to everything that's going on, respond to everything that's going on, and keep a good record of what's going on. So it can be very helpful in that aspect. There's a question here then about, I've stayed at home to look after my children and my husband was the only earner. How will I ever be able to afford to live if he moves out? Will I have to wait until the divorce settlement to get any money? And what if he doesn't pay the bills if he moves out? I think this is for me and you, Hannah.
It's a proper Hannah and Abigail one. Yeah,
it's a proper us question.
If I start off, like, Abby, chip in whenever, but I think so Abby mentioned earlier that each case that we look at will turn on its own circumstances. The court in these cases will look, and obviously we have to, whilst we hope we don't go to court, we still have to sort of look at what they would consider, and the court will consider all the circumstances. So if things like the fact that you've contributed to the relationship by looking after children, you've made that decision, that will have been a decision that you will have made together as part of your marriage. So that type of thing will be taken into account, but it just very much looks at the circumstances, and there are mechanisms in place for situations like this. Abby, I think, will agree with me, is that we come across this situation quite often, and there are mechanisms in place that will ensure that your needs are met as well. Going forwards, you're not going to be in a situation where you don't have a roof over your head, or you don't have that income if you need it, and it's then it there's always something that we can do. Does that Abby, is that sort of generally, is that what you would sort of?
Yeah, I would agree. There is always something that can be done, whether there is a temporary measure, whether it's a case of we're temporarily going to deal with a decision and then the ultimate decision at the end is something different, whether it's, we slightly change it after a few months. There's always something that can be done. But I think the main takeaway I wanted to put across is you don't have to be financially contributing to it to have contributed to your relationship. Your contributions are as equal if you've stayed at home and looked after children as the partner who went out and earned the money, because like Hannah said, that was a decision that you both made in your relationship. So there's not one higher than the other. That frankly doesn't matter. And the needs that you have, what you need to live, what you need to rehouse, is the thing that is the most important. And frankly, if it's going to be different, it's going to be different, but that is just what your needs are. We've got another one here, which might be for you, Rebecca.
Go on then.
Come on then. I made the decision to end the relationship recently, and I'm really struggling with the guilt about breaking up the family unit. Any advice on how to deal with it?
Yeah, it's a really tough one, because the general feeling, if you say to somebody, I ended my marriage, that people are like, oh great, so you must be really happy then because it's your decision. And actually it's so much more complicated than that, and just as sad as it is for the person on the receiving end of that information, because it comes down to, you've had that bit more time to get your head around the idea because it's come from you. What I would say is that you need to go back the guilt is big and the guilt is real, okay? But what you have to think about is what brought you to this decision. And I'm telling you now, it won't have been something that you woke up and just went, you know what, I'm done. It will have been something that you've been pondering for a considerable amount of time. And I'm pretty sure you would have done absolutely everything you can in your power to make this relationship work before you've reached this decision. So I think if you're the person that's been on the other side of it, please hear what I'm saying. This person hasn't just woken up and gone, I'm done. This has been a long process for them. And with regard to the children, you know, we have to think about, and it's a big subject, but we have to think about what we're modeling. It's okay to make change, and it's okay to model that change to our children. And you know, it is, the guilt isn't going to help. The guilt isn't going to get us anywhere. The guilt's going to hold us up. And it's not to say that that's not going to creep back in every now and again, but I really urge you to go back to your original reasons, write them down. Why did I leave? Why did I get to this point? And that, you know, with the children, it's reassuring them, we will be okay, kids. It's a big change, but it will be okay. We've just got to, things are going to be different. And, you know, it's a massive conversation. It's a big thing. And so if you have done that, then, you know, well done never feels like the right word, but you know, you've made a really big life-changing decision, and you won't have done it lightly. So just go steady on yourself and the people around you.
Absolutely. And then I think we've got a final question here. My husband announced the marriage is over just after Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants a divorce. I have no idea where to start. What shall I do first?
Well, I mean, my immediate response to that is get a notepad. So seriously, this is about standing still and taking it. You don't have to make any decisions today. You don't have to have a plan. You don't have to know what's going to happen, because you have to deal with the emotional impact that this has. So the shock, the disbelief, the devastation. But I think once, you know, it's giving yourself some time, some space, and being very clear about your boundaries. You know, boundaries is something I bang on about every single day. You have to have your boundaries. So what can you cope with? What can you deal with right now? And then for me, you know, if this was a client in my space, I would be supporting them to go and get that all important advice, to understand what their rights are. And then just digest that, let it marinate, and kind of work out for you, and take some time to be emotional. If it's crying, you know, take some time off work if that is feasible for you, but tell somebody that you really trust and really love, who knows, not going to judge you, and you know, you have ask them to support you in this, because it's big. There's no other words. You know, hearing that word, that divorce word, is a big word that you don't expect to hear, because, you know, we don't get married, you get divorced. It's as simple as that. And so when it does happen, it's life-changing.
No, absolutely, I agree. And I think, and as well, initially it's difficult to find out what you need to know. Who do I speak to first? And I think Rebecca's tip on getting your book out, finding the emotional support in the first instance, will put you in a better stead to then make that step to find out, right, what do I need to know about the divorce? What do I need to know about separating our finances? Because it is emotional. It absolutely is emotional, on top of all the things we need to work out. Absolutely.
And my stay away from Google.
I was just thinking, I was like, that was going to be my top tip.
Sorry, Hannah.
No, we must have read each other's minds.
Yeah, and my other top tip, and anyone that works with me will know this, I am absolutely militant about social media. Do not put your divorce or your separation on social media, because it never goes away. So I know that you're devastated, but plastering onto some sort of whatever social media platform you use, you know, about how angry you are with your ex-partner or soon to be ex-spouse, it's never going to work in the long term. So please, no matter how desperate you want to do it, please don't.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you, everybody who attended. If there's no other questions, I will draw us to a close.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for attending.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.